I'm Ernie Manous.
And I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman. We'll also talk with University of Houston Law Center Seth Chandler, who will help break down the recent Supreme Court sessions.
Plus, Executive Director of the Orange Show Center for Visionary Art, Jack Massing, is here to talk about the upcoming Art Car Weekend.
And as always, we want to hear from you. Give us a call or send us a text at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us live on YouTube by going to houstonpublicmedia.org.
All that and more right here on Hello Houston after the news from NPR and News 88.7.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. President Trump has given Iran until 8 p.m. to give in to his demands, or the U.S. will launch a major attack, including on bridges and power plants. This morning, President Trump posted on social media, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." World leaders and experts have warned that attacks on civilian targets could be considered war crimes. The U.S. struck military targets on Iran's strategic Kharg Island today. NPR's Daniel Estrin reports from Tel Aviv.
The U.S. official says the targets struck on Kharg Island were not oil infrastructure. They were restrikes on targets the U.S. hit previously in the war. The official was not authorized to speak publicly and spoke on condition of anonymity. It's unclear what the purpose of the strikes was. Kharg Island is the center of Iran's oil industry. President Trump previously threatened to seize control of the island and oil facilities. Israel has been carrying out its own strikes today on what it called infrastructure tied to the Iranian regime. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
A federal appeals court in Oregon is slated to hear arguments today on whether federal immigration officers should be restricted from using crowd control weapons outside a federal immigration facility in Portland. Conrad Wilson with Oregon Public Broadcasting reports.
Protesters and apartment complex tenants who live across the street from the ICE facility sued in separate cases to curb federal officers from using tear gas, pepper balls, and other munitions. In both lawsuits, they argued their constitutional rights were being violated. Two federal judges in Oregon agreed, issuing separate orders last month that drastically limited when federal officers can use those weapons to cases with specific and imminent threats of physical harm. The Trump administration appealed, arguing the restrictions were unlawful and dangerous. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals temporarily paused those orders as they consider the case. Their ruling could dictate whether clouds of tear gas once again become a common sight at demonstrations in the city. For NPR News, I'm Conrad Wilson in Portland.
The 4 astronauts on the Artemis II mission are on their way back to Earth. They traveled around the moon and farther than any humans have before. Brendan Byrne from Central Florida Public Media has more on the story.
This is first and foremost a test flight of Orion, its first human passengers. And the crew will demonstrate the radiation shielding of the spacecraft, manually control it once more to see how it moves. But one of the most critical tests will come during re-entry on Friday as the Orion space capsule punches through Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour and during temperatures of up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That re-entry will test the heat shield and parachutes that will slow the crew down so their capsule can gently splash down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego.
Brendan Byrne reporting. Stock prices are falling at this hour. The Dow is down 336 points. This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. The city of Houston failed to raise firefighter pay last year, according to the terms of a contract approved in 2024. That's the finding of an arbitrator who decided a contract dispute in favor of the firefighters union against the city in late February. News 88.7's Dominic Anthony Walsh reports.
Because of the decision, the city must raise salaries by 3% and issue about 6 months of back pay to firefighters. Firefighter Union President Marty Langton blames city bureaucracy, not Mayor John Whitmire, for the dispute ending in arbitration.
I can tell you that I don't think in a perfect world the mayor would be, thrilled that any of this stuff would have to happen.
The raise was required because the city and union jointly secured an additional $13 to $15 million from the Texas legislature, triggering a raise contingent on new revenue in their contract. The city controller's office estimates the raise and back pay will cost an additional $10 to $12 million. I'm Dominic Anthony Walsh, News 88.7.
Whitmire's office did not respond to a request for comment. New wildlife crossing signs are up on the west side of Galveston to keep cars from hitting a rare hybrid coyote that lives on the island. The Texas Department of Transportation put the signs up after hearing concerns from local wildlife experts about the ghost wolf mortality rate. TxDOT's Brooke Bowman says roughly 70 ghost wolves were killed from 2020 to 2025.
On FM 3005 specifically, west of the end of Seawall Boulevard is where the ghost wolf mortality really started to ramp up.
Ghost wolves are a type of hybrid coyote with DNA remnants of the critically endangered red wolf species. Houston police are investigating a shooting on a Metro bus that happened late last night in the Heights neighborhood. Authorities say this happened just after 10 o'clock near Studemont Street. A bus that serves the area was involved. Multiple outlets report. Metro police say that the suspect boarded, appeared disgruntled, discharged a weapon, and then took off. No injuries were reported. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Live from Houston Public Media, News
you're not hearing
88.7,
sound
it's
from the
Hello
show, are you?
Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond.
Okay, yeah, let me look
Call
them up.
now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now your hosts for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous and Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us
there
today on Hello Houston. Today is April 7th. To 2026, whether you are watching us on YouTube or you are joining us in your car, we want to thank you for choosing to be with us for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. We're talking before the show starts about like the hectic craziness of life every day. But,
Yes.
you know, 11 o'clock gets here and we have no choice. You know, doesn't matter the world around. You know, you probably all have that same thing. There are those moments, those times you have to be where you have to be. And life has to fall into place. And here we are every day for you.
Every day, whether your kids are being good or bad, or following directions or listening
Why
to you
would
or
Celeste
not.
say that? Are you having a...
Well, you know, my daughter turned 10 years old, and I think that every parent talks about, you know, every season there's challenges and it gets better, it gets better. And I'm not sure it does.
It does.
What I mean by that is it just seems like it's different, but it's still challenging. And I tell you what, I wear many hats, and one of those is being a parent, and it is one of the hardest, most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
Okay, and I want all of you to help us out with this one too. Do you believe in the adage, the more you have to do, the more you can do? You know, that whole idea that the busier you are, the more you get things focused, and the less you have to do, less gets accomplished, you're lazier, you do less. Do you find that true?
A little bit, but you know, Ernie, I think a lot of it right now for many people is that it's not even the amount of things we have to do. It's just the amount of everything. You know, there's so much news, so much information. There's so many activities. There's so many expectations. And, you know, I'm not sitting here in any way, shape, or form complaining. It is a beautiful day outside.
Yes.
We are here, and
nice little chill
we
out
get
there.
to do this job every single day.
Okay, I'm going to shamelessly name drop for a minute here because it fits what we're talking about.
Ooh.
I was talking with Walter Cronkite one time about this very thing, and what he said about when we think about the news coming at us, your story reminded me of that. Back in his day, when he was the news source, the record, basically, he said, you know, we told a story, we reported the news, and then we had 23 and a half hours to plan the next day's newscast because they were on a half an hour a day. And it gave them time to vet stories and look into stories. Now, when we had this conversation, it had to be 28 years ago, maybe. And at that point, he was saying, now news comes at us so fast, so quickly, and everyone's in such a rush to be first with a story. You don't have that same time to process and digest what you're learning. And then you jump up to us today. This much more quickly news comes at us. Every moment, every thought that anyone has is out there and being analyzed and processed. How accurate is it all?
Well, and we also used to be, if we're going to kind of go down this route, the news used to be the place where newsmakers would go to. Major organizations, elected officials used the news as their platform. If they needed to get a message out, if they needed to relay information or, talk about something, or they would have to go to the news.
They came and played in our sandbox.
Right. Now, everybody has their own podcast.
I like the switch between anybody to everybody because it's so true. Everybody can say whatever, whenever, and broadcast to whoever.
However, and we're watching that happen in real time. And we're going to be discussing this a little bit later in the show, but we're even seeing that happen with our very own president.
Yeah. It's funny, you talk about that and you think about how crazy and everything it is, but there are a few people right now who are many, many miles away from all of this, out in space, looking back at this planet. And the one thing that struck me that they've said so far is when you look out, and we've heard this said before, there are no borders. There's nothing separating. We're all on this one rock floating through space and we need to find unity there. And I think it's a beautiful message.
Totally. And you know what else?
What?
We have headlines.
We do, and it's going to lead right into what I was talking about.
NASA's Artemis II crew is now on their way back to Earth from a trip around the moon. Their mission set a record for the farthest humans have traveled from Earth. They return with new knowledge of the lunar surface and key test flight data for the Orion spacecraft, which will help future missions take humans to the moon's surface. And joining us now to tell us more is Houston Public Media reporter Michael Adkison, who has been covering this story closely. Michael, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hey guys, how are y'all?
Yeah, are we, from where you sit and what you've been covering and watching, are we way worrying about two small things while there are some folks looking at the totality of us and our experience from far away?
That's a good question. I think that what's so interesting about this as a news story versus almost any other news story is the philosophy behind it and the sort of existentialism that I think these four astronauts up in space have been, really reconciling with their place in the universe through this all in a way that no one, or maybe not no one, but only about 25 people ever really have,
Right.
How small they are in the grand scheme of things and what that means. And I do think that there is something to be said about the everyday news cycle and how these four people, to them, it's just they're looking down at Earth and they're getting to see, 8 billion people all at once, essentially. I think there is something to be said for that.
So, Michael, you, as Ernie mentioned, you have been following this very closely. What are the updates? Where are the astronauts right now? From what I understand, they have begun their return trip home.
You're exactly right, Celeste. So essentially what happened a few days ago was the translunar injection burn. And I know that that's a pretty technical name, but essentially what they did a few days ago is they fired up their engines to propel them to go towards the moon. And essentially that's the last major burn they're going to do of this mission. Now they're just using the gravity of the moon and then here pretty soon the gravity of the Earth to pull it back. They're going to do a couple of corrective burns, but that burn a few days ago was also their way to the moon, and it was also their way home. So very interesting when you think about it from that perspective. But yeah, they're on their way back home. They did their lunar flyby yesterday afternoon and got lots of great photos of the Earth, which are coming out this morning. But yeah, they're on their way home. They should be back by Friday evening.
And from what I also understand, they broke a record from 1970, that the record was set by Apollo 13, that they ventured further from Earth than anybody ever has before.
Absolutely. So yesterday around 1 o'clock, they did break that record. So Apollo 13 had set that record in 1970. They traveled, I don't have the exact number right in front of me, but I believe it was about 248,000 miles from the Earth. Wow. And Artemis II not only broke that record, but exceeded it by about 4,000 miles. So they broke that record at 1 o'clock, and then they still had a few thousand miles to go and set that new record, which is about 252,000 miles from the Earth. So yeah, that was a pretty momentous moment. And you really felt like, oh, wow, history is being made. I think a lot of people have written off the Artemis II mission as, we've been to the moon before. They're not even landing on the moon. And I think that moment really solidified its place in the grander story about space exploration.
Yeah. Speaking about breaking things, at this point, I'm assuming we haven't really heard of any very serious or complicated problems, and so everything is on track. Except we did hear one thing was broken yesterday, and I do believe it was the toilets.
It's been troubleshot a few times, the toilet. So there's a couple of different issues. About on day 1 or 2, there was an actual issue with the toilet, which they fixed. And then from then on, it was an issue with the line that helps them get rid of the waste. It's nothing that's super concerning, but it is obviously, there's something so human about this problem that I think people latch onto. It's one of the few things I think everyone can wrap their minds around is when the toilet doesn't work. So there's something so human about that issue. And so a lot of people have really resonated with that story and that problem. But otherwise, NASA has really said that, there have not been many issues with this trip, that it has essentially gone according to plan. At one point, a few days into the mission, Lori Glaze, who is essentially in charge of the Artemis II mission, said that she couldn't have asked for a better mission, even in spite of those issues that we've already mentioned.
There was a beautiful story about naming a crater. They passed on to what we call the dark side of the moon, saw things no human eyes have ever seen before. Talk a little bit about the naming of the crater.
Right. So when they officially broke that record, the distance record set by Apollo 13, the 4 astronauts decided to carry the weight of that moment and decided to name 2 unnamed craters that are on the moon. One of them they're going to name Integrity, which is named after the nickname that the crew has given the Orion spacecraft that they're all in. It's called the Orion spacecraft, but every crew gives it a different nickname, and theirs was Integrity. So one of the craters will be named Integrity. The other one, which is much more emotional, will be named Carol, and that is named after Commander Reed Wiseman's late wife, who passed away about 6 years ago. And the crew wanted to name something in her honor. They weren't assigned to the Artemis II mission at that point publicly, but they've all worked together for so many years that they really talked about this felt like something that was important to them to carry on her legacy. And as Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen was reading that off and was saying very formal words to Mission Control here in Houston, he was getting so choked up that it was hard not to get emotional, that he had to spell out how to say her name, Carol. And it sounded like he was having trouble even getting the letters out, that he was just so emotional. You could see Christina Cook, another astronaut, wiping away tears. You could see, and of course, Commander Wiseman wiping away tears as well. It was a very hefty moment that I think everyone, you can't not be emotional when you watch that happen.
Right. And I think that there have been a lot of emotions around this entire mission from the very beginning. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Watching the launch actually, be executed. Tell us a little bit about what's happening inside of the command center right here in Houston, Michael. Explain to us how that process is working.
Right. So 24/7 throughout this mission, there has been a lot of different folks over in Mission Control. They are monitoring this mission round the clock, and each of them has a different responsibility. They all essentially report to the flight director, who's in charge of making sure that the crew follows the schedule that's laid out for it, and essentially that nothing goes wrong. So one of the most notable roles that I'll draw attention to, and who really had a role to play yesterday, is the new science console in Mission Control. That's a new addition that wasn't there in the Apollo era. Science was important to them back then, but the Artemis program really wanted to place an emphasis on how important science was to this process. So they had a whole science officer who throughout yesterday would be talking directly to the astronauts about what they were seeing, ask them questions about what they were seeing, and really, getting more information. And I think that really speaks to what yesterday was like here at Mission Control, which was more than any other point in the mission, there was just excitement in the air. I think people were excited to see the moon, to understand the moon a little bit better. So, Kelsey Young was the woman who was on that science desk, that science console. She's the science lead for the Artemis II mission. And you could just visibly see the excitement in her face. Her jaw was dropping at certain moments when they were describing what they were seeing. She was talking about seeing the other scientists doing fist pumps as the astronauts were talking through everything that was going on. So you could just feel the excitement was palpable in Mission Control yesterday.
Okay, I got a question for you, and I may have just heard this wrong or not been following the story correctly, but the pictures we're seeing that are coming back from Artemis II, are they being taken by the astronauts' iPads and stuff, or is there official cameras doing this?
So both. the astronauts in the process of getting to the moon have been taking pictures on their iPhones. And I think the social media conversation has been, wow, Apple better start taking those photos and saying shot on an iPhone. But yeah, particularly as they were leaving the Earth, a lot of those photos were taken on iPhones. But yeah, some of these photos here yesterday were as well. They're digital photos. That being said, they do also have film cameras that they're using on the Orion spacecraft. So of course, as anyone who's used a film camera since when they were popular, it's going to take some time to develop those photos. So we're still waiting on some of that film to come back. But those digital photos are starting to trickle in, and yeah, some of them were shot on iPhones from the different crew members, and they're pretty remarkable. I mean, the solar eclipse that the crew saw, the lunar Earth set that they saw as they came around the other side of the dark side of the moon and began to see a sliver of the Earth show, just pretty remarkable photos.
Yeah, I heard somewhere 10,000 photos or something they've taken.
Yeah, something that I don't know if they have an official number yet, but yeah, it was something like in the thousands of the number of photos they took. That was essentially, you picture what an astronaut does in space, and it seems like yesterday photography was like the main thing. These are all non-professional photographers, but that was their job yesterday, essentially, to make sure that we see the moon just as they saw it.
And it's incredible. A lot of these images are images that we've never seen before. And I think that is what's so captivating about this.
Yeah, showing the moon in different ways. One of the things that really stuck out to me from yesterday was when this crew, so I alluded to it, but I'll explain it a little bit more. They reached a point where they had a solar eclipse also themselves, essentially, that the moon was in front of them and the sun was behind them. So the moon was completely blocking out the light of the sun. And they noted, they were so struck by the way that they could see the dark side of the moon through the solar eclipse, that the light that was peeking out from the sides of the moon, if you can picture a solar eclipse in your mind, that sunlight was just illuminating the dark side of the moon. So even though it was so dark outside, they could still see it, which was, pretty stunning to wrap your mind around. At one point, they compared it to science fiction.
Wow.
Well, talking about seeing the moon, often we see that when we go to sleep at night. They have a really weird sleep pattern up there. Mm-hmm. They're like doing it in groups of 4 hours or something. Explain that.
So it changes. It fluctuates by day. They have, like I said, a meticulous schedule laid out for them. So, on some of the days, they only slept for a few hours at a time. On some of the days, it's been more like 8 hours. One of the things that I think is really interesting is they've talked about how deep some of their sleeps have been. I like to imagine how weightlessness would feel as you're sleeping. And they have said that it's a pretty good experience, that you feel a pretty deep sleep. But I will say they've also said that, when you wake up, it's pretty startling, because you feel like you're falling or something is wrong just right as you wake up and you kind of jolt awake. So it's been pretty interesting hearing how they describe sleep in space.
Well, and they talk about the size of the capsule and how big it is, because we think about all the ones in the past. But actually, it's still a really small space for 4 people to be together this entire time and live their entire life on top of each other.
The description that NASA has used is that the Orion space capsule is about the space of 2 minivans. So if you can imagine 4 people living in the space of 2 minivans for 10 days straight, it's pretty cramped. So they're also, mind you, exercising in that spacecraft. They have a flywheel that they're using. That was one of the major tests that they had for the Artemis II mission. They're living, breathing, eating, using the bathroom, all in that tight quarters. Before they all left for space, the 4 astronauts were asked about, have they come across pet peeves that the other astronauts have had? And no one really wanted to confess, this person really bothers me, or I'm sure I bother this person with this habit. They all kind of said, we've all got habits that we have. But we've been working together for the last 3 or 4 years. And so this is really, they're so tightly knit that to them, it's like we're just friends at this point, that we just work together. We've learned to be compatible with one another.
So what's the plan? When are they back on this Earth, those friends of ours?
Those friends of ours, I like it. So they're essentially traveling back to the Earth over the next couple of days. Today, they actually mostly have the day off, that this is something of an off-duty day for them after, the nonstop roller coaster of yesterday. But they have the day off, and then they're going to be traveling a little bit more. On Friday is when they're going to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. That's going to be late in the day, Friday, around Friday evening. They're going to splash down. I believe the time is about just after 7 o'clock Central Time. So it's going to be a little bit earlier in the day. They're for where they land. They're going to They're going to land.
They're going to drop
the coast
into
of San Diego. They're going to just pop by. Yeah, they're going to splash down off the coast of San Diego, and then the U.S. Navy is going to pick them up. So that'll be happening Friday evening. And then here at Johnson Space Center, there's going to be one final press conference to unpack how the splashdown went. And that'll be later in the day, Friday evening.
Do they have to do all the quarantine stuff we remember from when they came back from the moon, or is this much more casual?
That's a good question. I don't know if they're going to have to do a quarantine. I know they're going to do medical checkouts. Sure. There are things just as one example, there are things that happen to your body that zero gravity can really alter the way that your body works. One of the examples that they cited is something about the fluids. I didn't quite get the science behind it, but something about the fluids as they were, in weightlessness and in zero gravity, that the fluids in their body moved around to where a lot of them who wear contacts had to wear glasses. That this has happened before in space, that something about the way that your body operates and that weightlessness, that you no longer can wear contacts very well and you have to transition to glasses. I thought that was particularly interesting. So I'm positive they're going to get, medical checkouts and treatment, but I don't know if they're going to have to quite quarantine as they did in the 1960s. That's a good question.
Houston Public Media reporter Michael Adkison is reporting from the NASA Johnson Space Center. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Thanks, Michael.
And you can find more of Michael's coverage of the Artemis II mission at houstonpublicmedia.org. Coming up on Hello Houston, Law Foundation Professor of Law at the University of Houston Law Center, Seth Chandler will join us to help break down the latest on the Supreme Court. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
Meet Tio Choco. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. This is his story. Visit ridemetro.org/Choco to find out where is Choco.
$5 per month qualify for PBS Passport. Make your gift now to start watching at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
As Cuba has been largely cut off from the global marketplace, life there has been especially tough.
They're pretty ground down. They would just like to have normal lives, and they're aware they're not having them. So they kind of are past politics in a sense.
A look at the Trump administration's approach to reshaping the island nation. That's next time on Think.
You can hear Think with Chris Boyd. That's coming up tonight at 11 on News 88.7. Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from CertaPro Painters, offering residential and commercial painting services, from color consultations to full project management, estimates and more at CertaPro.com. Support comes from Galveston Historical Foundation, presenting the 52nd Annual Historic Homes Tour. Architectural history is shown through tours of private residences and special events, the first 2 weekends of May. GalvestonHistory.org. Support for Houston Public Media comes from Metro, introducing the Ride Metro Fare Card. The Ride Metro fare system replaces the Metro Q Fare Card for bus and rail fares. Details at ridemetro.org/fare system.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8, Lucy Worsley investigates the American Revolution, presenting the British point of view of the tensions and turning points that led to America's Declaration of Independence. Tonight at 8 on TV 8.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manous and Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
The Supreme Court is currently weighing a case focused on whether birthright citizenship can be limited by executive action. Meanwhile, President Trump has been publicly criticizing the court ahead of its decision, including a series of early morning social media posts calling birthright citizenship a scam and urging the justices to rely on what he described as common sense. The court has also recently ruled against conversion therapy bans, an issue that took up questions about the balance between state regulation and free speech. Joining us now to help break down the latest on the Supreme Court is Seth Chandler, Law Foundation Professor of Law at the University of Houston Law Center. Seth, welcome back to Hello Houston. Thank you for having me. And if you would like to join the conversation, if you have a question or comment for Professor Chandler, you can call or text 713-440-8870.
There's a ton we want to dig into today, but I do want to start with the president almost going after the Supreme Court on social media. And I know we're supposed to believe that the Supreme Court justices are above all of that and all of this chatter doesn't influence them. Does it, though?
My guess is that it doesn't.
Okay.
He showed up at argument.
And left.
Yes, he left. After his side spoke, he didn't want to hear the other side, which is his prerogative. I think they're robust. They're certainly aware of the political issues, but the political issues would be there whether the president spoke up or not. It's not the first time that there have been controversial cases before the Supreme Court. And so I think while it's, a show of force by President Trump, I actually suspect it has very little impact.
So who's he doing it for?
He may be doing it for his base to show that he's a fervent believer. He may quite sincerely believe that the Supreme Court is misguided, and he's simply exercising his own First Amendment rights to speak on what he wants to say. But does it have an effect? I'm actually doubtful.
And I'm curious, though, I want to zoom out just a little bit. And I'm curious, Seth, I want you to tell us what exactly is the Supreme Court being asked to decide when we look at birthright citizenship.
Yes.
And at its core, I also want you to tell us what the Constitution currently says about birthright citizenship.
Okay, so the text of the Constitution is all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state in which they reside. That's in the 14th Amendment. That amendment was clearly passed for the major purpose, it may have had other purposes, but for the major purpose of overturning the Supreme Court's ruling in the 1850s in the Dred Scott's case, in which they'd said that persons born of African descent could never be citizens of the United States. And so we have this language, all persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. For many years, since 1898, the Supreme Court, in a case called Wong Kim Ark, interpreted that provision to seemingly have only a narrow set of exceptions. That is, if you're physically born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States. Even if, for example, as in Wong Kim Ark, the parents of the kid were citizens of China and where it was impermissible for persons of Chinese descent to become citizens of the United States. But the Supreme Court in that case said, hey, Wong Kim Ark is still subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. If he violates American laws, he can be prosecuted. He's a citizen of the United States. And the only exceptions they mentioned there were children of diplomats, children of alien enemies, so that if a pregnant woman invaded the United States, her kid would not be a citizen of the United States. And finally, based on an 1884 case called Elk versus Wilkins, Native Americans who were born on a reservation, even if they assimilated into white or American society, would not be citizens of the United States. And those were the only three exceptions that they explicitly recognized. The question before the court is, well, but they didn't really have illegal immigrants at the time. That really wasn't quite a concept. And so maybe we treat persons unlawfully present or temporarily present the same way that the Supreme Court had treated Native Americans in that older case.
My concern with this, and I don't know where this came up in the arguments, but once you have an area where people can decide as opposed to an absolute. So if you're saying this child was born here, now somebody has to decide if they are a citizen or not. That's where the problem lies. Then who's making the choice? How are they making the choice? In an absolutism, we don't have that problem.
Right. So President Trump believes that the appropriate entity to make that choice is the executive branch. And so he did set forth
concrete criteria for determining who would not be a citizen of the United States. So, for example, people with temporary protected status, they were deemed to be only temporarily present. People with asylum applications pending, they were deemed to be only temporarily present. People who were here because they would be subjected to torture were they to return to their country, only temporarily present. So his belief is that it's appropriate for the president to decide. There is another perspective, which is that Congress has actually passed a number of statutes about who's a citizen. So, for example, by statute, they have made Native Americans citizens. And by statute in the 1950s, they used basically the same language as Wong Kim Ark. And so many people believe that that statute is Congress's determination that the right way to go is what the Supreme Court had decided in that old Wong Kim Ark case, and that there were only 3 exceptions to the idea that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States.
But I guess it was Justice Barrett, if I'm not mistaken, who asked a similar question to what I'm asking, but how does this process work then? If a child is born in a hospital, then, and there's question of status, or we don't know status, what happens?
Right. So the president's lawyer did attempt to answer that question. I'm not sure he did a perfect job, but what he said was, look, right now we do Social Security checks on the parents, and we see if they have a Social Security number, and that's used. So in the future, we could use similar mechanisms to figure things out. Where it would actually get difficult and where there would be lots of questions is, let's suppose this law is in effect not for 1 year, 2 years, but for 40 years. Then, in order to figure out whether someone's a citizen, you have to look at whether their parents are a citizen. But how do you know if their parents are a citizen? Well, you have to look at whether their parents were citizens. And so there's a question as to whether, if this really were to become the law, which I think is doubtful following the argument, how it would actually get implemented years hence.
And so I want to just go back to the legal substance of this. Can a president realistically change birthright citizenship solely based through executive action alone?
President Trump thinks that he can, that not only is it not a matter for the Supreme Court, at least at the margins, but that he can make determinations about how to interpret congressional statutes. There are 2 issues really at stake here. One is the constitutional issue, what does birthright citizenship mean? And the second is, as you mentioned, who gets to decide? It's conceivable the Supreme Court would say, look, we don't have to get into the constitutional issue. This is up to Congress to decide what the 14th Amendment means. And as long as they're not doing something crazy, we're going to respect what they've done. It's not something for a particular president to make up on his own, which a subsequent president, by the way, could then modify. And then the next president after that could modify.
And that's what I was going to say. This feels a little bit of a can of worms we're starting to see here. If a president believes that he can interpret any congressional statutes, then what does that leave for the next president to potentially say, well, I also want to reinterpret this or overturn this?
This goes back to the old case of Marbury versus Madison, where the Supreme Court back in 1803 said it is the province of the judiciary to decide what the law is. And so that principle may well be reaffirmed by the Supreme Court, in this case, Trump versus Barber, that's about birthright citizenship. And it might end up being a fairly short opinion, even though, lots of ink has been shed on it. I think there is a good chance the Supreme Court is going to write, Wong Kim Ark was not clearly wrong when we decided it. We don't just overturn cases willy-nilly. And this is up for us to decide. We ruled on Wong Kim Ark on what birthright citizenship meant, and you have not come up with a compelling case to overturn that decision.
And I would say, just based on what you're saying, though, I am also curious about when we have a president or an elected official, talking about these and bringing up very, controversial, I would say, or very policy that many would have an opinion on. Have we seen in the past something like this ever have real influence on justices, or is it just more about shaping public opinion?
Well, certainly President Trump is trying to shape public opinion. We have seen fights in recent years about the ability of the president to interpret congressional enactments. You may remember the fight about President Biden's letting go of student loans, of saying that people didn't have to pay their loans back. because of COVID, even though COVID was basically over at the time that he did it. And the court has developed various doctrines called the major questions doctrine, non-delegation doctrine, which limit the president's ability to just sort of decide things on his own. Sometimes, however, I will say Congress basically punts and they say, we're not sure what to do about this problem. Here's a vague standard. You executive branch agencies, you go figure out how to implement it.
And just to wrap this particular case up, I'm curious. So is this case actually about birthright citizenship, or is it over who has authority to decide things? What are we really hearing arguments about, and what will the decisions actually impact?
Yeah, I think the two issues are interlocked. It's certainly about birthright citizenship and what does that provision mean. The court, if it felt the provision was ambiguous, it wasn't clear what it meant, then we get into an issue as to which of the three branches is the final arbiter when push comes to shove. So it's about both.
Okay. Switching to another one that has a similar...
Really quickly, we do have a call that's come in. Steve from Uptown is on the line. And again, our phone number is 713-440-8870. He's calling about birthright citizenship. So I wanted to make sure we got his question in. Steve, welcome to Hello Houston.
Well, great show, by the way. I listen to it constantly. By the way, with the three pit bulls we've got as the host on this show, I'm surprised this hasn't already come up. Our beloved president says no other country in the entire world is stupid enough, and we can begin to add the adjectives, right, as to have birthright citizenship. And if you look at any of the AIs, they all agree on one simple thing, although the number varies slightly, that between 30 and 33 countries, other than the U.S., have unrestricted birthright citizenship. And if you add birthright citizenship with slight limits on it, then it goes up to about 40 countries. We seem to have a problem here.
You know what, Steve? I'm going to ask you to repeat that question and comment really quickly. We're having some technical difficulties, but what I believe what he was basically saying is that our president is saying that there are, not other countries that have done this before. And why are we doing it?
Right. And the president is right. That is, it is unusual to have birthright citizenship. Very few countries do. Other countries do, but most countries do not. So the issue, though, is this was the choice, apparently, that the nation made following the Civil War in the 14th Amendment. And is the proper way to change that perspective by a presidential decree, or is it to do what we've done in the past and say we got it wrong, we need a new amendment to the Constitution that says that not all people born in the United States are citizens of the United States, and we will have exceptions for people who are unlawfully present or only temporarily present. And that, in my view, would not be a crazy amendment to the Constitution. I think there are reasonable perspectives on both sides of that issue. The question is whether the president can do it on his own or whether we need to go through the formal process of a constitutional amendment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, quickly, I want to jump over to conversion therapy bans. Mm-hmm. And we look at that, and a lot of people are very upset about it. What I'm looking at it as, it's really a free speech issue and who can regulate what people can say and express. Where am I missing the boat on this one?
You're not missing the boat. Supposing, for example, that Texas were to say that you can't support trans rights on the air. You can't say anything in favor of trans rights on the air. That would clearly be an abridgment of your free speech. It would be unconstitutional. I don't think there's any reasonable person who would disagree with that. So the question is, and it would work the other way, supposing the Texas were to say, you must, if you say anything about trans rights, it has to be against them. Same thing. It's a violation of free speech. So the question is, does anything change because the state is now licensing the person and they are deemed to be a medical professional? Does that enhance the ability of the government to restrict what people say? And what the majority, 8 justices of the Supreme Court, agreed on is no. Where it is just talk, which is the case here, this woman was not prescribing any drugs, wasn't doing any other form of medical treatment. All she does is talk to people and tell them they shouldn't be trans, which that's her prerogative. The state in that instance, simply because it licenses the person involved, cannot engage in what's called viewpoint discrimination. That is saying not only what areas you can speak and not speak about, but what you must specifically say and not say on that subject. And they got 8 justices, including 3 of the liberal justices, to agree, who might have some sympathy for the Colorado law at stake here, that no, just because you get to license someone does not mean you get to govern exactly what they say.
So as much as maybe you don't like the ruling of the implication of the ruling, it does reinforce the freedom of expression that we have across the board.
Absolutely. And for what it's worth, I think the Supreme Court got it exactly right here. I think the state should not be able to tell people what to say simply because they've given them a medical license.
And that's was my next question is, what do you think that this ruling is basically signaling how the court views the balance between, individual rights and state regulation?
Right. So this is not a case of a state employee where the rules might be different. And it's not the case of an individual at large where I spoke of earlier where the rules might be different. This is a little bit in the middle where the state has some involvement with the person. They are determining whether to license them or not. But what the court said is that doesn't give the state extra power to do the most dangerous thing. And the most dangerous thing is not only to tell you what subjects you can speak and not speak about, but to tell you what position you must hold. And Colorado crossed the line here.
Right. And so, when we look at both of these cases and we look at, what we're seeing in regards to birthright citizenship, and we also look at the ruling about conversion therapy, does it tell us anything also about the court's legal philosophy? Are we starting to get a better understanding of that?
I think it's hard to tease out a philosophy from 2 data points. You've got a lot of data points going on, some of which we'll get later in the term when the Supreme Court decides important issues on voting rights, on President Trump's ability to fire people simply because he doesn't like their political views. And so I think the one thing I would say is you do see Justice Jackson staking out sort of an individual jurisprudence on some issues. She's the lone dissenter, for example, in Childs versus Salazar, the case about conversion therapy. And her perspective is that, look, we regulate what medical professionals say when they're doing it in connection with other medical procedures that they're doing. Why is this really so different? And so I think you've seen Justice Jackson emerge more in the past year or 2 with her own individual philosophy, which some people may very much dislike, but it's becoming more distinctly her own.
Take me to another case that we just heard yesterday, the Steve Bannon situation. What's going on there? The man broke the law, was convicted of breaking the law, served the time for breaking the law, but now let's ignore it.
Well, he got pardoned, did he not?
Yeah.
And so he's pardoned.
But then what is the Supreme Court judging in here?
I have not done a detailed study of the Steve Bannon case, and so rather than saying something that might be wrong, I'd rather just say that, in general, the president does have the power to pardon people, and that's what you get when that's one of the things of winning and losing elections, is the winner gets to pardon the people that he likes if that's the extent to which he wants to take the pardon power.
Well, we'll pull you back to talk about that case another time.
I do, yeah. But I do think it's also very interesting, when we look at the Supreme Court, or this court specifically, it's been hard to essentially, like as you mentioned, pinpoint or see any type of consistent approach when it comes to interpreting constitutional rights. Do you think that is a signal that's good, or do you think that we should be seeing more consistency?
So I think the one other trend that we're seeing is a consistent deference on the part of some of the justices, more than in the past, to executive power. We are seeing, I think, we would call them conservative justices. I think, Justice Alito, Justice Thomas, to some extent Justice Roberts, are more buying this argument that emerged in dissents in earlier years, that the Constitution says all executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States. And by all executive power, it really means all executive power. And if you were the executive of a corporation and you didn't like the way someone was performing their job, you would fire them. And you could get your team in, and you wouldn't be bound by the decision of previous Congresses or previous presidents and be stuck with people who are executing the law, and you would get to pick your own people. That's a trend that I think we're seeing. It's a very, very important trend because it means that the political consequences of any given presidential election are even greater than they would be otherwise. We're seeing that with respect to the war in Iran, where the president is evidently able to decide when, how, what to do without much congressional interference. And we're seeing it in the Supreme Court generally becoming more deferential to what the executive wants to do.
There's so much more I want to talk about, and we're out of time. So many different elements. But as you mentioned, coming up, we're going to start getting the decisions in the spring. And that's when, around June, that's when it really gets crazy.
And we look forward to having you back. Seth Chandler is a Law Foundation professor of law at the University of Houston Law Center. It's always great to have you, Seth. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Coming up, the Art Car Parade. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
When author Emma Stroud...
Meet Damola, songwriter, world-class violinist, and award-winning multi-genre artist. We just took his keys for the day and gave him a Ride Metro fare card. Visit ridemetro.org/Damola to learn more about his ride.
Pleasure. I'm Elsa Chang. The new book, American Fantasy, on All Things Considered from NPR News.
All Things Considered begins at 3 this afternoon here on News 88.7.
All the big airports, JFK, Atlanta, LAX, they are just crowded. You know what aren't? Smaller regional fields.
So people don't have to drive 2, 3, 4 hours to find a flight. If we have it here, we'll be able to serve that same customer.
I'm Kai Rizdal. You are now free to move about the country. Next time on Marketplace.
You can hear Marketplace beginning at 6:30 this evening here on News 88.7.
Support comes from Rice University's Master of Interdisciplinary Studies, a flexible degree taught by Rice faculty, balancing life and learning for working adults. Applications due by May 15th. More at gls.rice.edu.
Support comes from the Houston Symphony, presenting Adams Conducts Adams, an Appalachian Spring, welcoming composer and conductor John Adams and music of Aaron Copeland, April 18th and 19th at Jones Hall. Tickets at houstonsymphony.org. Support comes from UT Health Houston, Houston's health university, where education, research, and patient care come together to help advance health and improve lives in Houston and beyond. More at houstonshealthuniversity.com.
You're the reason this station exists, and we're here every day with news you can rely on. That's our commitment to you and this community. Right now, we need your support to keep that going. Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manous and Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
Okay, this week, beginning on Thursday, it's Art Car Weekend in Houston. Gatherings, viewings, performances, a ball, and of course, the Art Car Parade on Saturday. And once again, Houston Public Media and Hello Houston will be among the announcer panels. Matt Harab, Michael Adkison, and Jim Kovacic. And yours truly will be announcing during the parade on Saturday over at City Hall. But right now, to talk all things Art Car, we welcome back Jack Massing. He's the executive director of the Orange Show Center for Visionary Art, who presents the Art Car Parade, and a good friend of our show. Hello there, Jack.
Hello, Ernie. Is that you?
It is me. Is that you, Jack?
It is.
It is.
How do you like my shirt?
I love it. I can't see you. You're on the phone. But anyway.
Oh, darn it.
What I will say is I don't care what you're wearing as a shirt. What's all over these cars?
These cars are just fabulous. This is going to be a great year. We have so many cool cars, a lot of new cars from kids in the school system, and we have some great out-of-towners. We have a return from a guy who was in the parade in the 1980s, and he's got this big truck covered with all kinds of detritus from the desert. It's amazing.
Okay, for folks who are unfamiliar, and I can't believe it if you live in this area that you're unfamiliar with Art Car, talk a little bit about why Houston and what we have to offer.
Well, Houston is the Petro Metro, right? I mean, it's a car-centric place.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the energy capital of the world, and the oil and gas industry really blossomed here after the discovery of that oil over there near Beaumont. And, so Houston just naturally is the petrometro. Because of that, a lot of the people here in the early part of the 1900s, they had a parade downtown called the Notsuo Parade or the Notsuo Festival, which was Houston spelled backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And they did the entire parade backwards. People walked backwards and drove backwards and everything. And we didn't really know about that. It was kind of underreported at the time, I suppose. But then back, fast forward to the late 70s when several artists around town started decorating their cars and doing fun things. And then came the first real parade was part of the New Music America Festival in 1986, where a guy named Tom Cora designed a parade for the Festival of New Music that traveled around to different cities at the time. And he elicited the help with some of the local artists here in town. And those artists actually knew some of the people that had the art cars that were driving around as daily drivers. And that was a really fun, small parade that kicked off the whole idea to the Orange Show at the time with Suzanne Tice and Marilyn Oshman at the helm in those days. They liked it so much, they then did the art car parade in 1988, which was the first one. And it was pretty small, and it wasn't a big deal, but it grew.
Jump ahead to today. How many cars are in the parade this year?
There's 250.
Oh, my Lord.
And last year, Ernie, for your information, 306,000 people came to the art car parade.
Oh, my. And it's free and open to the public, and you folks go along. What's the route this year?
Well, the lineup party is on Allen Parkway, on the north side of Allen Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a great place to see the cars up close and meet the creators of the cars. It's really a great part of the parade. So people can just walk along and look at them up close and talk to people and hear the stories of where they came from and how they made their car and envisioned their car. It's a great thing. But then the parade leaves Allen Parkway and it goes around downtown, around City Hall, and then back onto Allen Parkway.
And I opened this segment by saying it's Art Car Weekend. It's not just the parade on Saturday. Tell me about the other events surrounding it this year.
It's not. We have Sneak Peek, which is at Discovery Green on Thursday evening. So people can do the same thing they can do at the lineup party. They can go to Discovery Green and see all the cars. A lot of those cars will be the ones that light up because it's at nighttime, the evening of Thursday the 9th. And then the parade, of course, is on Saturday the 11th.
Oh, you skipped over the legendary Art Car Ball.
Well, I was about to say, and in between those two great events, thank you, Ernie.
You're welcome.
Is the Art Car Ball, the legendary ball. And this year it's going to be downtown at Herman Square Park, which is the front of City Hall where the reflecting pool is. And that is a really fun and great event. There'll be a bunch of cars there parked around the block, but then there's also a bunch of really interesting performance art and fire dancers and a DJ set from these two wonderful twin brothers from Puerto Rico. Their name is Ponce Lee, and they are just fabulous. They're actually making a car this year, and they're going to be in the parade and stuff, but they are going to be the Orange Show Center's visual arts residency in November, later in the fall.
Jack, there's so much going on. I don't want to keep you from getting it all prepared, but I'll see you on Saturday, if not before. Jack, thank you for joining us.
You gave me the hook.
The Art Car Weekend begins on Thursday at 9 a.m. as art cars will visit all parts of the city through a series of mini parades and visits to schools, hospitals, nursing homes, developmental facilities, and other spaces where residents may not be able to attend the parade themselves. Followed Thursday evening at Discovery Green, where you can get a close look at over 100 art cars on display. Friday night is the legendary art car
ball. And for more info, you can head to theartcarparade.com. Coming up, we're going to continue discussing today's top headlines. We're also going to discuss, again, the top headlines, and stay with us for the second hour of Hello Houston.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Metro, introducing the Ride Metro Fare Card. The Ride Metro Fare system replaces the Metro Q Fare Card for bus and rail fares. Details at ridemetro.org/fare system. 68 degrees at the University of Houston. Mostly sunny skies expected throughout the day today. Beautiful weather. This afternoon's high right around 76. Some clouds rolling in tonight with the overnight low near 60. And then more sunshine tomorrow and a little bit warmer. High tomorrow, 79. Right now, 68 here at the University of Houston, here at KUHF, your NPR station, KUHF Houston, News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's now 12 o'clock.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, President Donald Trump warned that a whole civilization will die tonight if Iran does not meet his latest deadline to agree to a deal that includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz. We'll discuss this and more of the top headlines of the day. I'm Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
And I'm Ernie Manous, President and CEO of the Greater Houston LGBTQ+ Chamber of Commerce, and the Kinder Institute introduce us to the new Houston Area L.O.V.E survey.
Plus, artist Tom Everhart will tell us about a new exhibit authorized by Charles M. Schulz that uses iconic Peanuts characters in his paintings.
And we want to hear from you. So give us a call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us live on YouTube. Simply go to houstonpublicmedia.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. President Trump is repeating his threat to Iran. He's demanding Iran reopen the Strait of Hormuz to international oil shipping by 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Otherwise, the U.S. will start bombing Iranian power plants and bridges. Under international law, bombing these civilian sites could be considered war crimes. NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports.
On social media, Trump posted, quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again," adding that he doesn't want that to happen, but it, quote, "probably will." Trump's message on the war against Iran has been mixed since the start. He previously described U.S. actions in Iran as an attempt to help Iranians from a repressive government. Third-party countries led by Pakistan continue to try to further negotiations between Iran and the United States, but no agreement has been reached. Trump said in a press conference that any deal on the table needed to include the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to ensure the passage of oil. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
The U.S. struck military targets on Karg Island early this morning. A U.S. official not authorized to speak publicly told NPR they were restrikes on targets the U.S. had hit before, not oil infrastructure. President Trump has threatened to seize control of the island, which is the center of Iran's oil industry. The war is affecting countries throughout the region. Majed El-Ansari is the spokesman for the Foreign Ministry of Qatar. He said today the war will only further drive up prices for people, and it threatens international peace and security.
There are no winners in the continuation of this war. There are only losers, and the net of losers is expanding every day as a result of the ramifications of the economic situation. But we are working with all our partners in the region and beyond to make sure that any window of opportunity is utilized.
He says if the war continues, food shortages are likely to become more widespread. The benchmark price of crude oil in the U.S. has climbed to its highest level in nearly 4 years. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on the economic fallout from the U.S. war with Iran.
The disruption of energy supplies caused by the U.S. war with Iran has pushed domestic crude oil prices to their highest level since 2022, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Gasoline prices rose another 2 cents overnight. AAA says the average price at the pump is now $4.14 a gallon. Orders for long-lasting manufactured goods fell 1.4% in the month leading up to the war. That was largely due to a sharp drop in orders for jet airplanes. Not counting transportation products, durable goods orders were up in February. And activist investor Bill Ackman wants to buy Universal Music Group. Ackman's offering $64 billion for the label, which is home to acts including Taylor Swift and Bad Bunny. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. Houston ISD announced it may expand their controversial education model known as the New Education Model, or NES, to 9 additional schools. The model was first implemented at the start of the state takeover to 85 campuses and has since grown to more than 130 schools. It has been met with both support and criticism. So what exactly is NES and how does it work? News 88.7's Bianca Seward explains.
The model places a strong emphasis on discipline and testing-based instruction. Students under NES follow a district-approved curriculum that includes 4 timed quizzes in each of their core classes every day. The more regimented schedule also makes for a longer school day. It was originally launched at historically low-performing campuses, but is now found in nearly half of schools in the district. Officials boast the model has improved test scores and raised the ratings of dozens of schools. But a recent study from the University of Houston showed students are dropping out of NES schools at higher rates than at non-NES campuses. HISD has not yet announced which 9 schools may be allowed to use the model. The district did not answer questions from Houston Public Media about how much expanding the program would cost. I'm Bianca Seward, News 88.7.
The city of Houston must raise salaries and issue back pay to firefighters due to the loss of an arbitration hearing. The firefighters union successfully argued the city failed to honor the terms of a 2024 agreement by not raising salaries 3% in December. Marty Langton is president of the union. He says the dispute dragged on for about a year before going to arbitration.
And so it got to the point where we filed the contract grievances so that we can make sure that we're protecting the rights of the firefighters, but also that we're getting the things that have already been negotiated and put in the contract.
Houston Mayor John Whitmire's office did not respond to a request for comment. In sports, the Astros last night lost on the road to the Rockies in the first game of that series. They've now dropped their last 2 games and 3 out of their last 4. The two teams play again tonight at 7:40 in Denver. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Pew Charitable Trusts, sharing about the state of housing in America on the After the Fact podcast. Available at pewtrusts.org/afterthefact, and the Doris Duke Foundation.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now your hosts for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous and Celeste Diaz-Sherman.
Back, both of us waiting for the other one to start. We're back again for the second hour of the show. A lot went on in the first hour, a lot about the Supreme Court. There was so much more I wanted to get into, and there's so much going on there. But I think the thing that really should stand out for folks is that oftentimes we get caught up in the minutia of the actual case that has been brought to the Supreme Court as opposed to the real issues they are deciding. Oftentimes they get confused. And so you think, oh, the Supreme Court came out against transgender or about transition therapy, when actually what they're coming out against is limiting free speech. And oftentimes you got to process it through and see where this is coming, because some things that look really bad on the surface may ultimately have a stronger positive in your world. But it's just an interesting thing, and he's a great guest that we have.
He's so knowledgeable because he really can talk about the Constitution, and that is, and the powers at B in regards to interpretation, overturning, and understanding the dynamics at play at a much higher level, right?
When I used to do the show interviews, and now we do it as a podcast here with this show, but one of the most exciting and interesting guests I had Justice Sotomayor on as a guest, and to talk to a Supreme Court justice about how they decide these things and why. It's still on YouTube. You can find it. But it's really fascinating because they don't look at it the same way we look at it. They're
That's
not
right.
looking at a case as a case. They're looking at issues of legislation, of legality, of things like that. So it's fascinating. Also,
really
though,
is
fun
fascinating.
part of it all, art car parade, getting to talk with Jack about the art car.
Yes. So last year I had the opportunity to.
You got to do it with us.
I got to do it with you
Yeah.
guys, and that was so incredible. You know, when you are out there at the Houston Art Car Parade, you really do feel like this is Houston at its finest.
And he said over 300, what did he say, 350,000 people came out for it last year?
Last year. And, you know, we were up there, we were emceeing, we were calling out the cars. And as I was looking, I would look up and look at the car, and then I would start reading about it. And each one has such an interesting story behind it.
And the artistry behind it, who makes it and who does it and why they do it and what it's made of.
So many cars are obviously local, but so many are also not, that they drive in from other states. It was fascinating.
If I am not mistaken, we have the largest art car gathering in the world. They do have art car parades or art car gatherings in other places, but we have the largest one right here in Houston.
Yeah, and it was just absolutely so fun. I will not be out there this weekend, but you will be.
Yeah,
out there this
you
weekend. My
doing it
mother-in-law is she's having her 70th birthday party.
I guess that's allowed.
And so
that's a pass.
we have family and friends coming in to celebrate her, and it's going to be fun. But you guys will be out there.
And Michael Adkison is going to sit in for you. He's got to get back from space. He's not really in space. He's just down at NASA. And he said to me, too, he could fill in for you, but the astronauts got to get back first. So that's why my real question at the end of his interview earlier about when are they expected back wasn't really about the astronauts. It's to make sure Michael can do Art Car Parade
on time.
on
And
Saturday.
also our executive producer, Jim
Kovacic will be there, and Matt Harrod, your morning anchor, who's actually doing the noon news with he was doing the 11. Did he do it today or was it last week? Because Alexandra was out.
Yeah.
And he'll be with us. So you can come out and see all of us. We'll be on the north side of City Hall on Walker Street. So come see us.
Yes, and we have quite a few YouTube comments coming on.
Oh, do we have a favorite art car?
Do we have a favorite art car?
My British computer guy is asking us.
For me, if I remember this correctly, there was one art car that literally was done with little stones that looked like a complete piece of mosaic art, and it was beautiful. And I remember being it caught my attention because the detail to it was so meticulous and every little piece. And I thought to myself, how do you drive that?
Well, a lot of those, which strikes me as very odd, are everyday drivers, as Jack made reference to. Those are their family cars. They go to the grocery store. I see them all the time.
There's an art car in my neighborhood.
Yeah. It's just very funny to me. Alex Garza says, I'll do weather today. Oh, because we don't have weather right now. Today in Houston and the surrounding areas, it's looking pretty good. We may have some rain later in the week, but overall, go out and enjoy the day. Back to you, crew. Thank you, Alex Garza, for doing our weather for us today.
Yes.
Well, coming up in the show, we're also going to talk. There was weather. We're going to talk about love. The Houston Area L.O.V.E survey is out. We're going to be talking about that. And if you love the Peanuts and you grew up with Charlie Brown and the whole gang, you're going to want to hear our interview coming up about an artist who got the rights to work with those images and those. I don't know why I'm slamming my hand.
I'm like,
down.
Ernie,
I'm very
stop
aggressive
slamming.
about this. Had too much coffee. They're going to be here to talk about that in a little bit. But as always, got to start off with the news.
Yes. Airstrikes hit 2 bridges and a train station in Iran on Tuesday. And Iranian officials urged young people to form human chains to protect power plants, as U.S. President Donald Trump warned that a whole civilization will die tonight if Tehran does not meet his latest deadline to agree to a deal that includes reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Trump has extended previous deadlines, but suggested the one set for 8 p.m. in Washington was final. Trump threatened to destroy all of Iran's power plants and bridges if Tehran does not allow traffic to fully resume in the strait, through which a fifth of the world's oil moves. With the clock ticking, Iranian president wrote on social media, "More than 14 million brave Iranians have so far declared their readiness to sacrifice their lives to defend Iran. I too have been, am, and will be sacrificing my life for Iran." Now is the time to join us on Hello Houston. We would like to know, what are your thoughts on the latest developments? You can call or text 713-440-8870.
That last line you read sent a chill down my back. This This is I don't want to, how to say it. This is a people who believe in the right to sacrifice their lives for what they believe in. And I think sometimes, and I'm stumbling through this, so please don't hold me too harsh to the way I'm saying it, but the concept being different cultures view things differently. And we often apply our views on how we see them. And maybe in this country, there aren't as many people who would rightfully step up and say, I would rather die for my country than see my country destroyed. And yet here is a country where many would say that. Now, there is the opposition in the country, and there's a lot of people who are against the regime in the country and want to see it changed. And so they may not be falling in line with what the president is saying of their country, but it is a culture and a people we have seen who believe that, you sacrifice something great for something you believe in that regard.
Right. And something that I think that for me sticks out is the rapid escalation of this. This feels like it is escalating very quickly. We have seen the president put deadlines before that have been missed, and it raises questions about the credibility versus the real risk that's at hand. And I'm curious, I think there's a lot of question around, or the big question to me becomes, is this really a negotiating tactic or a genuine prelude to a large scale war? And then when you start to look at this type of language, I mean, it's a very stark warning. A whole civilization will die tonight. I mean, that really is a big departure from typical diplomatic language. And I think that many of us were holding out for some type of diplomacy, de-escalation. We're seeing Iranian pulling out of peace talks. We're seeing, and there's been just this very rapid escalation that is alarming.
Well, it's funny. We not funny. It's concerning. We saw the tweet that came out on Easter morning, concerned about that. And then thinking, well, there's going to be some waffling, some way to roll it back. If Iran doesn't do everything that the president has said, the president may say, this was speculation on my part, the president may say, talks regained again, so I am going to grant them a moment while these talks proceed. We don't know how. But then to see him come out again, pushing this new missive, and then being so complete with what has to happen, which is allow traffic to fully resume in the strait. That's something that's very qualifiable, very much can be calculated. So if that doesn't happen by 7 o'clock our time tonight, they haven't done what he said. So what does he do next? Has he painted himself into a corner where he has to act?
And, to your point, I would look at, we have some real global economic stakes. We're looking at, the Strait of the Hormuz is the backbone of this angle, essentially. And I think that when we look at that, and now he's opened a strait, you have to go back and say, well, wait a minute, we went for it. Yeah. It's kind of, I was having a conversation before the show about this. It's almost like, we threw the first punch, and now we're saying, hey, we don't want to fight. Well, hold on. Or, we're going to only go there if this happens. They're like, well, no. Wait a minute. You're in this.
713-440-8870. Mani from Pearland is on the line. What's on your mind?
Hi, guys. Just as an Iranian, I just wanted to kind of talk about how Iranians feel about the war, both in Iran and the diaspora. Somewhere around 90% of Iranians, both inside and outside of Iran, are against this regime. And, we just lost over 35,000 of our young, brilliant youth 2 months ago in the uprisings against this regime that has actually no mercy for its own people. One thing to remember is that the most number of victimized individuals by the Islamic Republic of Iran are not in Israel or U.S. or Europe or anywhere else. They are inside Iran. And for 47 years, they've been trying to get rid of them. So when President Trump, talked about help is on the way, there was actually a lot of celebrations inside and outside of Iran that people thought that, okay, there's a way to weaken this regime so we can finish this regime up with our own hands, basically. And of course, I think the direction that the president is taking this war is going to be against that purpose, and is going to actually strengthen the hands of the Islamic Republic if they survive. And it looks like they may survive this, because they don't care how much damage President Trump is going to is bear on Iran. They don't care if we lose every single power plant or every single bridge. They have only one thing in their mind, and that's to stay in power. So it's just going to hurt Iranian people, and it's going to strengthen this government after this war is over. And this war is going to be over sooner or later, because the world cannot withstand the high prices of fuel and everything else. So I hope President Trump is not talking about erasing a civilization that has been around for over 3,000 years and is not going to go away with Trump or anybody else, for that matter.
Mani, do you think that there is any way at this point, given what the president says, given what we're seeing the Iranian president respond to, what do you think would be best? I mean, I know this is a very difficult question, but for the Iranian people?
Well, the Iranian people's hope and wish is to get rid of this regime and join the community of the world. We have over 65-70% of our people are under the age of 40, highly educated. Most of the best educated people from Iran who graduate from universities like Sharif, which, by the way, just got bombed by the Israelis, end up in Stanford and MIT. So we just want to be back with the world, with the rest of the world, and see progress and get out of this Islamic fungus that we have over there. But I don't think the rhetoric that the president is uttering is being helpful for winning hearts and minds. Iranians generally love America, and they are more Americanized than anybody else in the Middle East, including Saudis, Qataris, and anybody else that has a very close relationship with the U.S. So I hope that there is a revision and getting back to hitting IRGC and Basij, who are the ones that are, the terrorist groups, hitting them instead of hitting power plants and bridges and universities and even some of the historic sites that have been around for 600-700 years. So I hope there's a revision of these strategies.
Mani, help me a little bit with what I was stumbling through very poorly earlier. When you talk about 90% of the folks being against the regime, the 10% that are in favor of the regime, when we look at that group of people, what I'm trying to articulate, and I did it poorly, and I apologize for that, but is that we tend to think that when threatened with your life being taken away, most people would turn toward preserving their life. But when you are part of a regime that believes in the absolutism of what they are fighting for, the value on life is different. Am I articulating that right? Do you know what I'm trying to get at?
No, absolutely. And the religious fanaticism also comes to play for some of that 10%, which, they're misguided. Nobody hates them and nobody wants them destroyed. But they are bombarded with, they're brainwashed. And like any other fanatics around the world, no matter what kind of religious affiliation you have, there is a problem. We have Israelis have the same with Orthodox Jews. And then we have also, KKK that also believes that there are Christians, and their beliefs comes from Christianity, which is obviously not the case. So I think we're dealing with that. There's a 10%. Now the 10% is not a scientific number, right, because there's not an actual, statistics that prove it. But we feel that's the number.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure, as you are, and people across the globe are very concerned about what's going to happen in the next few hours, how this is going to play out. I still think we're hoping that something will be resolved and that peace will prevail sooner than later, but it looks really rough coming up in the next few hours.
Thank you, Monty, for joining us. And coming up on Hello Houston, we're going to speak with Tammi Wallace and Daniel Potter about the Houston Area L.O.V.E. survey. This is News 88.7. Stay with us.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're watching right now. So take the next step and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference. And what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a minute to make a big difference. So join as a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 800-364-8300.
And that commitment starts with you. This station shows up every day with reliable, unbiased news. Help us keep showing up for you right now. HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate.
Support comes from UT Health Houston, Houston's health university, where education, research, and patient care come together to help advance health and improve lives in Houston and beyond. More at houstonshealthuniversity.com. Support comes from GEMS, introducing mediator and arbitrator Paul D. Clote, providing alternative dispute resolution services in complex business and commercial disputes in Houston, Austin, and Central Texas. Paul D. Clote. More at gemsadr.com.
Support comes from Woodlands Waterway Arts Festival. Over 200 artists, authors, music, food, and family activities at the Woodlands Waterway. April 10th through 12th. Open for kids 12 and under. Tickets at thewoodlandsartscouncil.org, where dreams take shape.
Support comes from NAMI Walks Greater Houston, community walks supporting mental health education and support services through the National Alliance on Mental Illness. 2026 NAMI Walks Greater Houston. More at namiwalks.org/Greater Houston. Support comes from the Grand 1894 Opera House, presenting The Cat in the Hat, a live stage adaptation of the Dr. Seuss story featuring the cat, Thing 1 and Thing 2, April 18th. thegrand.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Celeste Diaz-Sherman and Ernie Manous.
A new effort is underway to better understand the experience and needs of LGBTQ plus residents across the greater Houston area. The Houston Area L.O.V.E. survey is the first large-scale community-driven project of its kind, aiming to capture voices on everything from healthcare and housing to workplace experiences and overall well-being. Joining us now to talk more about it are Tammi Wallace, co-founder and president and CEO of the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And Daniel Potter, who is the director of the Houston Population Research Center at Rice University's Kinder Institute of Urban Research. Daniel, welcome back also.
Thanks for having me.
And if you'd like to join the conversation, this is your chance, 713-440-8870.
Tammi, why don't you start by just kind of giving us a quick, what was the purpose of this survey and why did y'all feel like y'all wanted to create this kind of baseline?
Well, historically, we have not had data that represents the LGBTQ plus community in Houston or the region. And when you don't have data, you don't have that information, that analysis, it's very difficult to drive, for example, policies, economic policies, business policies. And so that's really at the core. The why is about making sure we have a voice and that we get strong data, information about lived experiences from the LGBTQ plus community in the region.
Okay, Daniel, then that brings up a point for me is why didn't we have that data? It seems as though it's not a, I don't mean disrespect, it's not a quiet community. There's voices, there are parades, there is talk. How come this kind of data was never gathered?
So there are a variety of reasons that are going to inform that. Part of it is some people a lot of times assume
that data just...
See, I would have assumed we had
it exists.
Yeah.
Fourth largest city. How would we not have that information? Other times it's sort of looking around the country and borrowing what research is being done elsewhere. And so like when we were setting this up, we were looking at places like Austin that had done this before, Philadelphia as an example, and sort of borrowing some of that information. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we do need to know about what's going on here in Houston. And so this is a great opportunity for us to launch this first ever initiative.
So how far along are we in the project?
Oh, yeah, we are launched. So the survey is live. It is active. We are recruiting people. We're using word of mouth and snowball sampling is what it's referred to, where if you are eligible to respond, we're wanting to hear from you. And if you can share it with other people that you know, then we're interested in hearing from them as well. Our data collection started back in February, and we're going to run it through the end of Pride Month in June.
You know, in Ernie's intro, he mentioned some of the topics that were covered, and I'm interested in understanding how you all came to decide on what were the most important topics to cover and why.
Yeah, so this is where at Kinder we start with the community when it comes to so many of our research projects, and this was just a beautiful partnership that blossomed organically out of just, I don't want to call it a random conversation, but just sort of an informal discussion in 2022. Right. And so from there, it grew.
Starting the conversation just, with the Kinder Institute, and huge credit to the Kinder Institute for stepping up to lead this survey along with the Chamber and our other core partner, the Montrose Center. These topics are driven by trying to understand exactly all of the lived experiences from the LGBTQ plus community, and so many facets impact our community: workplace, housing, healthcare. And so this is such a great start for us with this pilot year to begin to understand at least these larger baselines, so we can then try to determine where we drill down as we move forward.
Let me real quickly just go back to the data collection point. You're in the process of collecting data, but are we seeing results? Do you ever analyze as you're going, or do we have to wait till all the results are in before you start the analysis? Like, are we already learning things from it?
So we're a little bit of both. There is some preliminary investigation to understand who we're hearing from, where folks are responding, but really trying to recognize, like right now, we're aiming to have at least 1,000 respondents. We would love to get that number up closer to 5,000. We're making our way there, and part of it is not wanting to get too, ahead of our skis, if you will. On the results of those types of things, but that as that information starts to come in, we'll have those analyses ready to go. The goal is to have a report out in October of this year.
And Tammi, to follow up on where Celeste was taking you, I'm curious, so much of when we talk about the LGBTQ plus community, there's inclusion, there's being part of the larger whole. So are we looking at this more, in some ways, historically of experiences to this point? Because I would think so much now of this community is integrated, is part of just the general fabric. So why are we looking at isolated experiences, if you understand where I'm going with this?
Yeah, and we need to understand those experiences and really where people, what their lived experiences look like today. Okay. Think about when we get data, when we get information, and we find considerable gaps, right, in a specific area. We can then take that information to policymakers and talk about legislation, policies that can change the experiences that our community is facing. Without having this information, it's assumptions, it's anecdotal. But in this case, we get data. And that data is coming from voices, people's voices, sharing with us their lived experiences.
One of the lived experiences, or one of the topics that you all look at, is financial stability. And I was curious how that would work. And I think this is kind of piggybacking also to Ernie's question, is how would that look different, or why would it look different for somebody who was in the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah, there are a variety of factors that could be at play here. And part of it is to go back to Tammy's point, the not knowing. Right. Is that ultimately if we get data and investigating, exploring and understanding that research, what we come to learn is, the barriers that individuals are facing are barriers that are shared across for everyone. If we're seeing some of those challenges that folks are facing are shared, it doesn't necessarily negate that personalized, important experience that individuals and groups might be having, but in some ways it reinforces the importance of our shared collective experiences. And really, for us, one of the things we always think about is if you're improving the community for anyone, you are improving the community for everyone.
Right. And I think what often happens just in general, and I'm going to use the word marginalized communities, is sometimes they don't want to share because they're worried about, I don't want to give you my information because I have perhaps experienced some type of discrimination, or I have experienced I've had a negative experience in being who I am. My question then becomes, is everything confidential?
Yes. Yes, we are living in a time where data is being weaponized in ways it has not been weaponized before. It is simultaneously being used to erase individuals as well as to destroy them. And so one of the things we have got to be very intentional about is when we're asking people to trust us with that information, that we are taking that trust very, very seriously. And so the data that are being collected are confidential. We are storing them with insecure drivers. We are disconnecting any sort of identifying data from them before, going back to the analysis question, any analyses are getting done on essentially de-identified, which is to say anonymized data at that point. Because of this question around data security, we take it very seriously and we've put into place those processes.
Talk to me a little bit about the experiences and the differences, as I call it, between the letters. So between the L community, the G community, the B community, the T community. In a lot of ways, some of those communities are very different experience, a very different path than the others do. What are we seeing already in that difference, and even in how they're responding to the survey?
Yeah, so one of the things, so again, for this survey, we're still in those early phases, but
we're going to have you back when you've got some results for us too.
I love chapter 2s. This is great. And so, but one of the, we've done research with other data that we've collected in the Houston area, looking at things like mental health across LG and B individuals. And we've seen differences in terms of what lesbian respondents are reporting, gay respondents, bisexual respondents are reporting. And some of it draws back to folks who have community. And so there, one of the things we saw was that bisexual individuals in particular were reporting higher levels of mental health challenges. And this was coming out of the pandemic. And one of the reasons that we saw sort of emerge out of that was, you hear people talk about there's a gay community, there's a lesbian community. Is there a bisexual community? Is that something that's prevalent and present? And for sure there is, but how prevalent is it is a question there. And so for a lot of folks, they were not feeling that they had that community to connect into and that was corresponding to lower mental health.
They find themselves identifying with one or the other, either the straight community, the gay community, the lesbian community, and feeling as their path might not be fully there for them, for their community. Tammi, I am curious, though, in today's day and age, should all these, once again, the letters, be together, or should they be separated out?
We're one community, regardless of the letter. And so I think to Dan's point, different communities, different identities within our community are experiencing, different lived experiences.
Right.
And it's important, it's incumbent upon us as a community to elevate these different stories and address the unique differences in the letters. But at the end of the day, we're all one community, and one community means we can move forward together.
Right. And I'm curious, unless you have a follow-up.
I have a really dumb question.
No, there's no such thing.
Yes, there is. Watch it. Here it comes. Love. I know the O is for opinions, the V is for voices, and the E is for experiences. What's the L for?
LGBTQ+.
Okay. So you use a letter to represent a bunch of letters to represent.
And I'm going to give Dan credit. He came up with this acronym.
It works.
And Celeste, to your point earlier, talking about the trust factor.
Yeah.
We want our community to know that the Kinder Institute is not just a core partner, but a trusted partner in this work. Yeah. It's so important that our community understand that Kinder has really stepped up to fill a void, to partner with us in such an incredible way. But they are such a trusted partner for us in this important work as we move it forward as well.
Back to intelligent questions. Celeste?
No, but I'm curious, as we talk about that trust and gaining somebody to buy in and share an experience, that could be excellent, could be wonderful, and also could be not wonderful. Once the data is collected, how will it be used to make an impact? Who are you trying to reach with this information?
Yeah, I very much appreciate that point, because one of the very intentional aspects of the survey was to make sure that it wasn't just about deficit. It
Right.
wasn't just tell me all the worst things that have ever happened.
Right.
It was talk about successes. Where have you had achievements? Because while we, again, to Tammy's point, we want to be able to elevate those disparities and issues that we want to address while also not sitting here pretending like there aren't amazing successes
Totally.
that are happening throughout all communities, right? And so I appreciate sort of that point being pulled forward. In terms of the action step, that again goes back for us to this partnership where we're connected into core entities like the Chamber. We're connected to the Montrose Center, and both Tammi and Avery have been so generous in using their own networks and professional connections to figure out how do we connect into other groups, whether that's in local government, whether that's other nonprofit organizations. And this is your place to shine, Tammi. I'm sorry.
No, you got it.
So thank
See,
you.
we've been working together for so long now. Yeah. No, you got it.
Talk a little bit about going beyond Houston, because Houston experiences, inner city experiences, I'm assuming can be very different than outlying communities and regions surrounding us. How far are we reaching with this survey?
Yeah, this was very, very important to us at the Chamber. At the Chamber, we're called the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. We focus regionally on our work. And we want our community to know that whether your voice is sitting in, 77006 with Montrose or, up at Montgomery County, is down as far as Galveston, all these voices matter when we think about shared experiences and gathering data. Because that's exactly right, Ernie. I'm sitting inside the loop. I've got a very different experience. We talk to our businesses at the Chamber, and they've got a very different experience when they're sitting in Montgomery County versus when they're sitting in Harris County.
And Daniel, you do survey, the Kinder Institute. You are in this every day. You gather information. I want to just touch a little bit about gathering all this information and then seeing it make impacts. That you would think that it would seem easy, but we see more and more and more. Sometimes facts and figures don't move the needle for people. So how do you move the needle?
Yeah, well, and part of that, we as folks within the academic research space have to own that issue, because for a century we did research that we thought was important if it was published. We thought it was important if it found its way into a journal and sat on shelves collecting dust. Yeah. And shame on us for that, because a century of that approach got us to where we are today. And so there's a lot of trust that's having to be rebuilt and a lot of initiatives that are having to get restarted about connecting research that is rigorous and high quality into individuals, organizations, local communities, again, community partners like the LGBT Chamber here, that these are the folks that are going to take what we can learn through this information and do something with it. And so for us, part of it is a key of starting with where you're trying to go. And so that was an early conversation, was this isn't about doing a study for the sake of, hey, let's learn something real fast, information for information's sake.
Yeah.
Right.
This is about what are data points that we need as a community to be able to act with. And again, I, sitting at Rice, cannot know that. I'm not in that position. That is where, again, our awesome community partners are in that position to help us understand what is important for us to go capture, learn, and then start to share out to get used. And while we're here talking about the Love Survey, again, for Kinder, that is just this much bigger model that we want to embrace with the work we're doing.
Tammi, talk to me a little bit about, we talk about that we assume we're the same as others because we didn't do the data, but we hear other stories coming in. From where you sit in the unique position, hearing from other communities, other cities across the country, do we hear different experiences than what we've had in Houston? Or are we surprised to find out that the Houston experience is very similar to city X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I think it's both. So we regularly connect with our LGBTQ plus chambers across the country, and those living in very progressive cities. And let me define inclusive cities, which you're hard pressed to say Houston is completely inclusive. We are diverse, right? And I talk about this all the time. But in other cities, you see noticeable differences in terms of supportive policies, economic, housing, healthcare. The community is a focus. The LGBTQ plus community, it's just a norm for the community to have a seat at the table. That's what we've been working for the last 10 years to change, is to make sure we have a seat at the table, but it's not been the natural inclination of Houston. So these are the differences that we see. We see this, all you have to do is drive up, I-10 or 290 and hit Austin. We see a difference in the way their city has experienced things, particularly over the last 10 or 20 years, under the most challenging of circumstances versus the way we've seen things in other cities in Houston or in Texas.
And nationwide, though, who would we most be similar to?
Well, Seattle's such a great example. Our colleagues doing great work in Seattle, their progressive policies. I mean, when they get talking about economic initiatives, the mayor's doing things, the governor's doing things, and I would say this for Pennsylvania too, they are at the table. They are at the table. They are trusted voices sitting at the table. They want those leaders' input and thus the community's input. And we don't always see that here.
Leadership we've seen, though, locally has often fallen to the LGBT community. Not proportionately the same, but we have those voices out there. And I would think in some ways that makes us a very progressive city in that regard. One of the front runners for our upcoming county judge, it looks like it might be a lesbian. So, I mean, it seems like a very odd combination of ideologies, or however to word it, for this region, but we do seem very progressive in some ways.
We do. And, and inclusivity, right? It means not only having a seat at the table, but a voice at the table. That's what this survey is going to help us with. When we can bring this data and talk about lived experiences, the analysis, to really help people understand. We think we're here, but where we're really at is here. So what needs to change?
Interesting.
Yes, and Tammi Wallace is the co-founder. Sorry, I was so enthralled in y'all's conversation. I was just sitting here like, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot. I'm so excited to have you guys back when we have the data then, and then see where we're at with all of that. So this is a little preliminary, this conversation, but fascinating.
Yes, Tammi Wallace is the co-founder and president and CEO of the Greater Houston LGBTQ+ Chamber of Commerce, and Daniel Potter is the director of the Houston Population Research Center at Rice University's Kinder Institute for Urban Research. Tammi and Dan, thank you both for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you. Thank you.
And coming up, an artist's friendship with Charles Schulz. Stay with us as Hello Houston continues.
It's not just your car. It's the one that brought your kids home from school, took you cross country, held memories, laughter, even a few breakdowns. When it's time to let go, give your car a new purpose. Donate it and turn memories into meaningful support for this station. Plus, you'll enjoy free and easy pickup, potential tax benefits, and a simple donation process. Your gift supports the programs you and your family love. Donate today and help keep public media strong. Call or donate online.
Spring Radio Drive is almost here.
Right now, you have the chance to unlock $30,000 before the drive even begins.
And is that monumental or what?
Let's make some magic happen. When you give right now, you bring us closer to that $30,000.
We need 500 listeners to step up and give before Thursday night.
Will you make this happen?
Give right now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Tonight on Houston Public Media TV 8, Lucy Worsley investigates the American Revolution, presenting the British point of view of the tensions and turning points that led to America's Declaration of Independence. Tonight at 8 on TV 8.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Metro, introducing the Ride Metro Fare Card. The Ride Metro Fare system replaces the Metro Q Fare Card for bus and rail fares. Details at ridemetro.org/fare system.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from DeCamera, presenting the first Houston recital by pianist Yuliana Avdeeva, playing preludes by Chopin and Shostakovich, April 14th at the Wortham Center. Tickets at decamera.com.
Support comes from Amazing Place, where those with mild to moderate dementia and mild cognitive impairment can find ways to stay engaged, communicate better, and learn new skills. Hope Through Dementia starts when you do. Details at amazingplacehouston.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Celestia Sherman and Ernie Manous.
A unique art exhibit is currently on display in Houston, featuring the work of an artist with a special connection to one of the most beloved comic strips of all time. Tom Everhart is the only fine artist ever authorized by Charles M. Schulz to use the iconic Peanuts characters in his paintings, and that work is being featured in an exhibit right here in Houston. Joining us now to talk about his work and relationship with the famed cartoonist is Tom Everhart. Tom, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Okay, Tom, I guess you got to start with, did you grow up reading the Peanuts?
Sadly to say to you, I didn't.
You didn't? So then when did your love of this art come to be?
Well, I think it's important to understand where my head was as a child, the question that you're asking, and also where my head was when I met Charles Schulz. When I was a child, the environment that my family set up was no cartoons. It was read a book, forget about the cartoons. And I never got to enjoy cartoons ever. And in my academia, of course, cartooning was considered low art.
Right.
So it wasn't something that was taught anywhere, really. So when the time period that I met Charles Schulz is when I was just coming out of academia. And I had no interest really in cartooning whatsoever at that time either. I just met him through a particular project that I was working on.
And so what was that experience like? I'm sure you were, I mean, no disrespect in wording it, you were odd to him as someone who wasn't a fan of the work.
Well, he didn't know that right away. I'm really thankful for that he didn't know that. If you have a minute, I'll set up quickly the situation of how it was. I was in New York City, doing freelance work, fresh out of postgraduate work, and this was 1980. And in 1980, there were some interesting things going on. First of all, one of my favorite painters, Philip Guston, had just died. Philip Guston, if you know his work, was a pretty well-known abstract expressionist from 1950 to about when he died in 80. But half of those 30 years, he was doing cartoon imagery from 1965 to 1980. And also at that time in 1980, my good friend Keith Haring was just starting to take his marker and mark up the subways of New York. And then at the end of that year, I met Charles Schulz.
Wow.
Okay, talk to me about how the two of you encountered each other and then what grew out of that.
That was probably one of the most memorable things in my life that I'll never be able to get out of my head. Once I did the drawings for the freelance design group that I was doing the project for, that required me to draw particular drawings of his work, I told them I didn't want to go with them to California, to Santa Rosa, to a studio, because I didn't want this gentleman to see his work drawn again especially by a painter.
Yeah.
And finally, because I was, one of those young starving artists at the time, they talked me into going with a little bit of cash, and but they promised me he wouldn't be there. That was one of the things I was very promised. Don't worry, he won't be there. To just be his business people. He doesn't get involved in this kind of thing. So I went to the meeting. I'm explaining everything in the meeting, and I could tell the meeting got cold because I was at the front, with my drawings from the presentation, and I looked in the back of the room and I could see him sitting and I remember it perfectly. It was in a navy blue running suit with white stripes down the sides. Mm-hmm. And finally he walked forward out of the meeting, and I could tell everybody, it was like the seas parted. And he started shuffling around at my drawings, and I thought, oh, this is the end. This is the end of my trip. And he didn't look very happy. And he looked at me and said one thing: why didn't you copy these drawings like everybody else who's brought presentation drawings to our studios before? Why didn't you trace them or copy them? And I was really left at a crossroads for the moment, because I thought, do I be honest? Because I didn't get his drawings at first. It took me a long time to figure out how to draw the way he was drawing when I was studying his work to do this presentation. So I was scared to death. And I said to him, I didn't copy or trace these because I didn't want to lose the freshness of your originals, because I thought his originals his black and white drawings were like paintings. They look like Franz Klein paintings, like de Kooning paintings once you blew them up large on a wall. But once I said that, he took me out of the meeting and we spent the rest of the day in his drawing studio, and he started showing me his techniques, his quill pen, his ink, which materials that I was not familiar with at the time. And we just had a ball sharing what line was. He would ask me to draw lines in sets of threes. This was an exercise he had in elementary school, actually, where you would draw 3 straight lines, 3 crooked lines. But the exercise was to prove that even though these were exactly the same 3 lines, if you looked at them carefully, each line was a little different. And that was one of Sparky's biggest things, was, especially with me, was to see the same thing that everybody else saw, but come up with a drawing that nobody else saw.
Right. And now, Tom, as you mentioned that you've been using words like drawing and painting.
Yes.
Talk to us about the creative process of taking as you mentioned, a drawing and a comic type drawing into versus what you essentially do and large scale, very fine art.
Thank you for that. I usually don't get such good questions as that. And that is a very important question. As you know, fusing painting and cartoon subject matter isn't anything new. Warhol did it in '65. Lichtenstein did it in '65. There were several people who did this, but that was when it was pop art. And people do confuse my work with pop art quite often because of my cartoonogenic environments in my work. They're easily misunderstood as pop art, but they are not pop art, and in a way they're actually conceptual art. But to get back to the process, so fusing, I should say, the cartooning and painting in 1980 was a little bit different. All of my artist friends, people like the names like you would have heard of, like Jean-Michel Basquiat, and I could mention Keith before. So I could go down the list of people that were in my neighborhood and were my friends. But we were all looking for something to bring in a broader audience, because prior to 1980, for the last 2 decades, the art world was dominated by minimalism and conceptualism. And by the time 1980 hit, minimalism had gotten pushed so far that it was purely academic, and the audience had just shrunk. Everyone felt judged who didn't understand the work. So we were looking for things like landscape painting, portraiture painting, still life painting. And for me, it was cartooning. I didn't know it was going to be cartooning until I met Sparky, but for me, it was cartooning. And that was how I was bringing in a larger audience into my work and into art in general. But fusing the two was very interesting, because I told you that Sparky's line was very painterly. If you look at, say, his line versus a Disney line, which is very smooth and contoured, Sparky's line is very organic. It can wiggle, it can go straight, it can express human emotion, it can express human activity, all through this minimalized little black line. And to mix that with such a complicated medium as painting was exciting to me. Because, for example, think about this. Painters, especially Dutch painters in like the 17th century and such, it took them months or sometimes years to create an emotion in a painting, in one painting. Sparky could take a few little lines and do it in a little box and create that same emotion.
Tell me that, and
I mean,
you referred
that's
to
magic to me.
Yeah, you refer to Schulz as Sparky, just for folks to follow along.
Yes.
How the lessons you learned from him influenced the work you were doing outside of Peanut's work?
Did it? You mean outside of? Can you explain that again? I'm sorry. Outside of Peanut's work.
Outside of when you're creating images based on Peanuts, the lessons of art and what he taught you about line, did it impact across all of your work?
Oh my God, I can't even express how much it did. You know, I probably had about 8 years of serious art academia. And none of it made sense until that day I sat in him with his office that first day when he started talking to me about line. It made everything come together that I had learned before. I mean, when you go as an art student into school, they teach you, just an abundance of things, but I don't think they ever really teach you about how emotions really land on a surface.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Schulz could do.
Just
and so
amazing.
everything outside of my world became that part of my world as well. It was all one thing, just like painting. I don't mean to sound groovy or something or Mr. Fine Arts, but painting has been my world for all my life.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I can retire from. I mean, when I go is when my work goes.
Right.
So this is something that is my entire 360 life.
Well, you'll always be Mr.
Sparky,
Groovy to us at this point.
Tom Everhart, thank
Yes.
you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Oh, you guys are so kind. Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you.
You can view Tom's Peanuts art at our Off the Wall Gallery through April 24th. Again, Tom, thanks for being here. And that brings us to the end of
another
our show,
episode.
of another episode. We want to thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston, for watching, calling, and listening. We'll be back tomorrow with more conversations.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University, presenting Verdi's final comedic opera, Falstaff, in Brockman Hall for Opera with the Shepherd Chamber Orchestra, April 17th, 19th, and 21st. Tickets at rice.edu.